customer, what's the problem, and how do we solve it? This is the line of thinking that brought Omri Stern to address a major problem in an antiquated space. After joining a real estate software company, Omri found himself constantly battling the same challenges when partnering with commercial property owners. In response to these challenges, Omri, along with his co-founder, developed Jones Software, which offers property managers and vendors a modernized solution. With Jones Software, commercial property owners and managers can easily maintain insurance documentation for seamless transactions. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Omri's venture of launching a new software to spruce up what he's called a dusty industry. Plus, we'll discuss the importance of shifting mentalities from product and technology first to business and problem first. I'm Victoria Principato, and this is Yaptown. But maybe we could start with a little introduction, and maybe you could tell listeners a little bit about your background and how you came to start Jones.
Well, I guess I'll give you a lightning tour through the background. I was born in Tel Aviv, Israel. I, at a young age, moved to California, San Francisco, Bay Area. Mom and dad were entrepreneurs, and as well as grandparents. So very much felt like that was part of the DNA. After serving in the military in Israel, when I actually moved back for undergrad and service, I kind of discovered that the rather regimented lifestyle wasn't for me, even though I thought that might be my career, and found that in an environment like that, ideas are often sort of killed pretty quickly. And so I think I made my way into startups because it felt like that was a place to just be experimental and to really make an impact in a short period of time with very smart people.
Would you say that your military experience maybe made you a better entrepreneur in some ways?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think that most Israeli entrepreneurs who have a background in engineering in the Israeli military have a great level of training because they're actually getting some very hard skills that are then extremely valuable when you're starting tech companies. I was not one of those types of folks in the military, so I can't say that it prepped me with real hard skills, but definitely with more of the softer skills of having to deal with stress and pressure and coming a lot at you. I was basically a spokesperson handling the international press and interviews and presentations and communication strategy. So there was like a lot there that I suppose you could say was part of my sales upbringing, which inevitably is what I did in startups. And so after I'll continue on with the chronology. I joined a software startup in the real estate world. It was an energy management startup, and really, really loved the experience. Everything that I was looking for that wasn't part of my first chapter in my career was there in the second. And I joined as an early sales hire, and very quickly sort of got the knack of closing enterprise sales deals. We grew the company very, very rapidly over 3.5 years. I think we tripled twice, and it was a great experience. And I guess the best part about it was working with people who were equally motivated to build an exciting company in the real estate space. One of the things that got me to start Jones was an experience that I had there with customers where we were always struggling with risk and compliance approvals for large property owners. And so your eyes are probably glazing over at this point. Everybody hates insurance and risk, and nobody understands it. And that was
That's
actually
an important element of what you do. And I don't know, I think that's something you mentioned. I remember from your talk, you talked about that being the dusty space in the commercial real estate industry.
That's right. Yeah, totally dusty. And if you sort of take that metaphor and take it a couple steps further, right? There are literally rooms in real estate companies and in real estate management offices that are just stacked with old insurance certificates and insurance policies and collecting dust, because there's this process where whether you're a vendor or a service provider or a tenant, that is on a physical like site, whether it's an office building or retail building, you have to have approval to be there. Like you actually have to have your insurance approved. And it used to be that like all these documents were collected somewhere, either physically or digitally. And it's just a really frustrating process to have to imagine you're a property manager, you're reviewing hundreds of these documents per week, thousands per month. It takes up 2 to 3 hours of your day. It's extremely frustrating for everybody involved, whether you're the property manager collecting these documents, whether you're the vendor or the tenant providing these documents. It creates for a sort of sour relationship after the process is done because it takes weeks to get approval. And nobody wants that these days, especially when the real estate world is trying to figure out ways to provide better services to tenants, to enable easier, more seamless transactions on the property. And so that dusty experience, sure enough, turned into a massive problem that we discovered and just from our experience decided to solve it across the industry, and things are going super well. So very excited to be part of that opportunity.
I first met Omri in 2019 when I attended a founders panel at a WeWork Labs event. He discussed the many challenges of launching a company and the founders' anxiety that many entrepreneurs experience when building a new company. In tech specifically, many founders run the risk of shutting down by building products that fail to address a user's true needs. Here, we'll talk about the positive impact of Omri's problem-centric approach and how he's employed this method in building Jones.
Launching the company, I can get into like some of the more like, I guess call it quote unquote, like lean methodologies or whatever you have it. But in the end of the day, there's this one quote by, it's often used, but it's so true, by Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, says, just build something that people want, right? And if you think about what's at the heart of that, the process is really taking that experience that I had as a service provider, and then starting by simply interviewing and asking customers in the real estate industry, whether they were large real estate owners, mid-sized real estate managers, construction companies, like anybody that has to deal with this problem from the principal side, and just asking them, how do you solve this today? What's your experience? What are the pain points? Walk me through the steps, just like you just asked, right? Like, and what do you use to solve this today? And if I gave you a magic wand to like solve this in a better way, what would you do? And if you find that through that series of interviews, like there's a delta between what they do today and like what the world would look like if they had a magic wand, there's an opportunity there because there's a significant problem for them that's not being solved. And if you multiply that problem across, hundreds of millions of people, well, actually that's pretty large, but like millions of people who are property managers today, then you can find that there's a problem. And so you start off just speaking to people and asking them like, what product would you want to build? And then once we got a good sense for it, we just released a very, very lean, MVP or whatever, and started testing. And then that's how we just got it off the ground. 2 people in a apartment on Great Jones Street in New York.
So who was your partner?
So my partner is Michael Rudman. He's my CTO and co-founder. Michael's background is in machine learning and artificial intelligence. I mentioned the hard skills in the military. He was one of those folks that was in an elite intelligence and engineering unit in the Israeli Defense Forces. He was an officer there, and then later went on to join startups and build data science teams. He was also in large cap tech companies as a product manager. So just an experience from across the spectrum that was very valuable. I went to Harvard Business School. I was under this impression that I might be able to find a co-founder there. It's sort of difficult to find co-founders in business school. They don't tell you that when you're applying.
Interesting. I wouldn't think that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of risk-averse folks there. But luckily, one of my close friends, Lior Litwack, introduced me to Michael Rudman, who is also a close friend of his from the military. And that's sort of part of how Israeli startups get started quite often, is like you have this very tight network people in these units that end up like introducing each other to other people in their network, and then companies get started. So
Right. And Israel, I think I read your piece from Harvard Business Review. Israel's branded as the startup nation with more startups per capita than any country in the world. So maybe you could get a little bit more into why these Israeli startups face challenges in scaling, and then what it looked like for you to kind of overcome that barrier.
yeah, well, I'm flattered that you think that we've scaled up to the level that I was describing in the article, because we haven't yet, but we will. So I guess the common barriers that since writing that article in 2015, lots has changed. So let's just touch on like what was a barrier and what's changed. So it used to be that Israeli entrepreneurs would start, incubate their business in Israel, come up with a technology that, to be fair, Israeli technology is superior comparatively to, most other countries in the world, with the exception of Silicon Valley and the States. And anyhow, they'd start a company and say, okay, this technology is going to change an industry. So they'd be very like tech first or like product first, and say, okay, now that we've built this, the market will come. And the way that their approach was to say, we'll hire a team in the United States where the market is, or in Europe, and have that team be like A-list startup and like growth professionals that could then take that forward and grow the company. So like the CEO and the founder, like they might be involved in hiring and in like continued product management, but it wouldn't necessarily be like company building. That's what was missing at the time, was this ability to build a company, to build culture, to build processes.
Yeah, it's not the field of dreams. It's just like, if you build it, they will come. That is not the
no,
case.
that's not how it works, right?
Right.
That's not how like Microsoft was built or Apple was built. So I think that model failed, and that's why you saw a lot of like the startups in the 80s and 90s that were started in Israel ended up being acquired because great technology, but like not real companies. Now I'm generalizing here, but like if you look at that sort of generation, you will see that there are many less, much less like large billion-dollar companies in the first generation than now. So what's changed now? You have companies that are like real companies now. Like take a look at Lemonade. If you take a look at Hippo, take a look at Wix, and gosh, like they're sort of coming out of the woodwork. Monday.com, right?
Oh, wow. I see you're naming all of these, and I'm familiar with all of them, but I just didn't know that they were based in Israel.
Yeah. Based in Israel, with leadership that has been sort of burst through that initial like failed model and has actually become learned how to build companies. So like, and that's a result of one, I think, like experience, learning, maturation, but also a shift from product and technology first to business and problem first, right? Like basically, who's your customer? What's their problem? How do we solve it? And then build a company around that. And I mean, there are many entrepreneurs out there that are like, second, third time entrepreneurs that are doing this today, that would be able to describe it more eloquently than I can, but like, and more descriptively. But I think that's the high level and why I think things are looking up for the country, and you're seeing, or for the ecosystem in the country, and why you're seeing real companies being created with, the market capitalization to reflect that.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that we were able to at least touch on that a little bit. But do you have any last pieces of advice that you want to share with listeners?
I think this has been great. I mean, hopefully it's been helpful. I guess I'll plug Jones and saying, if the listeners are, if you're in real estate and you own real estate in any part of the United States, or you manage real estate in any part of the United States, we have a solution that is probably going to be very, very helpful for you. So check out getjones.com, and yeah.